An interval is a region of the real number line. You can draw an interval by highlighting a part of the number line. We use circles to mark the endpoints of the interval. A filled circle means that number is part of the interval, while an open circle means that number is not part of the interval. This interval is a way to visualize all the real numbers between -3 and 1, including -3 and excluding 1. There are an infinite number of points in this region, and there are an infinite number of real numbers in this interval. If you're not in a graphy mood, you can also use inequalities to describe this interval. This inequality is an algebraic way to say all numbers x less than 1 and greater than or equal to -3. Today, we're going to learn about another way to describe this region, interval notation. Let's look at the interval of all real numbers between -2 and 3. We'll exclude -2, so we draw an open circle at -2, and we'll include 3 by drawing a filled circle. When we write this as an algebraic expression, we have to choose a variable name. Let's use z in this example. If you think about it, the letter we choose for our variable is not that important. We're just describing a range of numbers. The way to describe this interval without using a variable looks like this. We call this interval notation. You write the two endpoints separated by a comma. The parenthesis on the left means the number -2 is not in this interval, and the square bracket on the right means that 3 is in the interval. So parentheses are like open circles, and square brackets are like filled circles. For practice, let's see a few more examples. Here is the interval from 0 to pi that does not include either endpoint. Using interval notation, we write down the endpoints and then surround them using parentheses. In this next example, the interval covers all real numbers between -3 and 1/2 with both endpoints included. When writing this using interval notation, we surround the endpoints with square brackets. And as we saw earlier, you can have an interval where one endpoint is included and the other is not. Here, the endpoints are -1 and 1. -1 is included in this interval, while 1 is not. So we use a square bracket for -1 and a parenthesis for 1. Next, let's look at an interval that continues forever. We're going to write this using interval notation. Here, the left endpoint is -1. There's an open circle, so -1 is not included, which means we use a parenthesis. What's different here is that there's not an endpoint on the right. The interval continues forever. In mathematics, we describe this using infinity. And we complete the interval notation with another parenthesis. In this next example, the interval covers all positive real numbers and includes 0. So the left endpoint is 0 with a closed bracket, and since the interval continues off to infinity, we write infinity with a parenthesis. What if instead the interval goes off in the negative direction? Here, the interval includes all real numbers less than or equal to 2. For this situation, we write -infinity to say the interval continues off to the left, and we close the interval with a 2 and a closed bracket. This next interval is all negative real numbers, and 0 is not included. So we write -infinity as the left endpoint and 0 for the right. We use parentheses for both endpoints. Brace yourself for this next example. What if the interval consists of all real numbers, that is, the entire number line? Here there aren't any endpoints. To write this using interval notation, you write -infinity on the left, positive infinity on the right, and use parentheses. Here's a question for you to consider. Why do you think we use parentheses instead of square brackets next to infinity and -infinity? To recap, if you have an interval on the real number line, you can describe it in several ways. You can highlight the numbers on the line for a visual representation. A closed circle means that number is included, and an open circle means it is not. You can also use an inequality with a variable. A less than or equal to sign corresponds to a filled circle, and a less than sign to the open circle. Using interval notation, you write the two endpoints and use a square bracket when a number is included and a parenthesis when it is not. If the interval goes off forever to the right, you use infinity as the right endpoint. And if the interval goes off to the left, you use negative infinity as the left endpoint. This lesson was brought to you by the Socratica Foundation.